Some big news in the world of college athletics. To break it all down, Swiss Army knife for us here at On3, the man, the myth, the legend, Pete Nakos. Pete, I want to start with this because you get the On3 Twitter graphic, and they're phenomenal all the time, but you get it, and it doesn't have a college football player on it or a college athlete on it. It just has the NCAA logo, and it says, Judge approves House versus NCAA settlement. And so as a college football fan, I see that, and I'm like, cool, interesting, how much should I care? Kind of distill this down for folks like myself that are trying to make sense of this right now.
The most distilled version is you should care.
Yep.
It is going to impact how schools build rosters, and it's the hope is that it's going to usher in a new era of enforcement, because for the last 5 years the NCAA enforcement has been zilch. Mm-hmm. It's been nowhere to be found. So those are the two things you need to care about the most as a college football fan.
And in 2025, we were talking before we got on the air, we're not really going to see this impact roster so much right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, specifically in college football. So like the top programs in college football front-loaded their rosters, which means that through the winter and spring portal, the settlement was not done. So then these schools were able to sign all their athletes to deals that won't have to go through this new NIL clearinghouse that is going to deem if a contract is a fair market value is what they're calling it. And so the interesting thing here, too, is the clearinghouse does not technically come out with the punishments. It's this new enforcement entity called the College Sports Commission, which is being run by the Power Five. And they have a new commissioner coming from the MLB.
Here we go.
And that entity is going to basically take over all college football enforcement as we know it.
Interesting. So there's a lot of verbiage there, from clearinghouse to, I know rev shares getting thrown around a
lot of words.
And there's a lot of stuff that we're like, I don't really hear that typically when I'm watching a college football primetime broadcast with Herbie and Fowler on the call.
It's not going to impact their calls.
Interesting. Okay. So when you're talking about roster construction, do you think this is something that'll be like, are we going to talk about clearinghouse more frequently? Like, hey, guy was going to play this week, however, his clearinghouse deal didn't go through, so therefore he's not eligible for this game in week 6 against Michigan or A&M or whatever.
Maybe we get there at some point. I don't see it breaking down like that. I see a lot of it being, a school promising to a quarterback, hey, we're going to get you a $3 million deal. But because schools are only going to have like $13 to $60 million to spend on football, they don't want that $3 million of revenue sharing to go to the quarterback. So they're going to say, hey, let's go get you a deal with a local business that might be worth 1.5. Then our marketing firm is going to go get you a couple of deals. That'll be another 1.5. And then we got to push it all through this clearinghouse. And that's where, there's just a huge unknown right now. And it's not going to impact Carson Beck or John Mateer or Darian Mensah getting paid this upcoming season. It is going to possibly make an impact on 2026 quarterbacks.
Okay, interesting.
So Lenore Sellers' deal to come back for his junior year, it's South Carolina will probably have to. It's going to be a little bit more interesting to get done than it was in December to bring him back as a sophomore. Is he a redshirt sophomore?
Yes, he's going to his third year right now.
Okay,
So
that was a bad example. But if he comes back, that deal is going to be interesting to see how it comes together.
I think a lot of people in NFL circles, with how many starts he's had, are saying, hey, Lenoris, we'd love to, unless you go crazy this year and win the Heisman, which we think could happen on this show, maybe another year would serve him well. And if he does come back.
But that deal will be very interesting to see how it comes
good
together.
Money.
Yeah, he will definitely get some good money.
So the clearinghouse, just so I have this down correctly, the clearinghouse is essentially like the mechanism they're running these deals through to see if they're in good faith.
So you'll
or
have
legit,
two
or?
deals.
Okay.
So you'll have your rev share deal, which is when an institution directly pays an athlete. Right, that's never happened in the history of college sports, so that's historic. And then you have, your brand and NIL deals that have existed for the last 4 years. But now, if a local business signs a deal with an athlete in Columbus, Ohio, and it's over $600, it's got to go through this clearinghouse, and they got to read the contract and deem if it's a fair market value, and then the if it's overly lucrative in these people's minds and opinion, then it could go in front of the College Sports Commission. There could be some punishments if the contract moves forward. Now, but the whole other unknown to all this, JD, that everyone's trying to figure out right now is so you have your revenue sharing, you have your brand deal, but then NIL collective deals, these booster deals that we've talked about so much for the last 5 years. It's why Bryce Underwood flipped from LSU to Michigan. Yeah. It's seriously impacted recruiting in the transfer portal. all those deals now have to go through the clearinghouse. And historically, if a quarterback transferred from a Big Ten school to an SEC school and they got $2 million, we're like, okay, that's what that guy's getting paid. Maybe he'll make some like social media endorsements for the collective, but no one's looking at that contract. Well, now that collective deal, if a collective tries to do something like that, is going to be looked at by this clearinghouse. They're going to seriously look at all the deliverables and say, is this athlete doing enough to make that deal worth, that value?
Interesting.
And now there's all these new hypotheticals, like some lawyers on Twitter were talking about, like, what if you overload it with deliverables, but you never enforce the deliverables?
Interesting.
So, like, there's all these what ifs that are really going to, like, shape how much money athletes get paid in the years to come.
So I guess the hope behind this then is that there's just more regulation, because it felt like for the longest time everyone's shouting about, hey, too many, bad actors. It's like the fear for some people.
I don't know if the bad
college
actors
sports
are going
world.
away because there's still no regulation over agents. Right?
Interesting. Okay.
But the regulation that the Power 5 conferences are hoping for is this new College Sports Commission is going to have more teeth to enforce rules about NIL and payments. And then the other thing we have to talk about too when we talk about all that is these conferences are currently circulating affiliation agreements that would require Tennessee to abide by a certain set of rules in the SEC and not kind of go rogue and just follow the state law, which would give them an advantage over another school in the SEC. So those agreements haven't been signed yet. They're expected to be signed. It sounds like they'll get signed before July 1st when this all really goes into effect. But there's just so many layers of this. And to boil it down the most for college football fans, I would say you don't have to worry a lot about it, except I think in the months and years to come, it's just going to be fascinating to see how roster deals are constructed. And we'll also have to see how much teeth this enforcement has, because that could really, set the stage for how much athletes get paid and how much, is enforced and not enforced.
Because that was one of my other questions is, as this whole thing progresses, like the NCAA, is like on the graphic for this whole thing, and we're talking about them at the front of the conversation. But as we get further into this, we're talking about
they're more
the
relevant
conferences.
than ever.
So is this a thing where we could see the NCAA? It's very clickbaity to say the death of the NCAA, but is that kind of the direction?
It's been dead.
Okay.
And this College Sports Commission definitely takes even more power away from it when you look at enforcement. And then, not to, go off track here, but then the conference commissioners are also talking about a new governing body structure for the NCAA, which we don't need to get into now, but it just reinforces the point that the NCAA is more irrelevant than ever.
On the clock. On life support is the NCAA. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, I mean, they might be past life support.
Wow, okay.
They're really good at organizing championships. And if you talk to a Power 5 commissioner right now, they'd probably say they'd love for the NCAA to exist and still organize the Division I lacrosse championship in the NCAA tournament and things like that. But I think that's kind of where it's at.
That's where we draw the line.
And, like all this Connor Stallion stuff is going on in the background.
Sure.
And there was the NCAA hearing last week in Indianapolis. That is really going to be like the last true, enforcement that we see from the NCAA.
The last stand.
At least when it comes to, NIL and dollars and stuff. And I know Connor Stallions isn't involved in all that, but just so much enforcement is going to move to this College Sports Commission entity.
Just the tangential, the Venn diagram of it all is very, very interesting. Because I think, not to beat a dead horse here, Pete, but seeing this, my first thought was, okay, so more money is being distributed to the athletes, probably a good thing.
Yeah.
But also you're saying, okay, if a Texas wants to go out and land a 5-star, or a Miami, or a USC, or an Oklahoma, or whoever, it's like those third parties, those collectives, or the people that aren't quite as involved on the rev share side of things, they can still go and say, no, we're going to go get Carson Beck. We're going to go get whoever. But it could get more
difficult now.
Okay, because of the clearinghouse part.
Because of the clearinghouse part.
Got it. Okay.
But we also don't know. The clearinghouse doesn't have federal backing, so they still are trying to go to Congress and get that.
Got it.
And then if there's no federal backing, then how real are the punishments? And then the College Sports Commission, right? They don't have the power of a search warrant, so it still falls back to all the issues NCAA enforcement had.
Interesting.
The one thing I should mention too that I think is interesting is talking to some schools and stuff. So you're gonna have like 13 to 60 million in revenue sharing.
Whoa!
But for football, but Ohio State spent 20 million on last year's.
I was going to say, yeah.
Ohio State and Texas and the schools they're not going to slow down. So it's just going to get the total budget for a roster this season is probably going to be about 25 to 30 million. So you get 13 to 16 from rev share, and then you got to find the rest of it on these outside deals and stuff. And that will really come into focus when we talk about 2026 rosters.
And you have a great article out right now on on3.com, so go check that out right now. Pete breaks us all down, very palatable, breaks down recruiting, breaks down front loading, breaks down quarterback, which is where I want to get your thoughts here before we let you go back and just do what you do so well, which is great news to the people and get the people what they want. But the quarterback price point, Carson Beck, conversations around $4 million. Darian Mensah, I mean, what was it, like
Over $3
million?
Over $3.
More money being pumped into this thing. Quarterback, we think, is becoming more important than ever in the expanded playoff.
Yep.
Is that a thing where we see that number even increase to where, hey, a quarterback's going to cost you $5 million, $6 million?
So there's imagine if you get like a pair of binoculars. There's almost like two lenses you got to flip back and forth from. So like one lens is what you're paying the top transfers right now, which is like $2 to $4 million, and that's kind of what starting quarterbacks expect. That's why Nico Imala left and went to UCLA. He wanted more money. So I think that $2 to $4 million number maybe it grows a little bit. I mean, Bryce Underwood's making like roughly 3 to 4 a year right now. So that number's there. But on the flip side of it, the other lens, you have high school recruiting. And those deals are not being vetted by the clearinghouse until they get to campus. So there's now the opportunity for schools to pay recruits top dollar up to like $20,000-$25,000 a month before they get to campus in like a separate marketing agreement deal with the NIL collective.
Wow.
So you have maybe like 50 to 100 recruits in this 2026 class getting some cash up front for their commitment.
Whoa. Okay.
So, but that changes the math when you talk about how much a quarterback's getting paid.
Interesting. Okay, so the bottom line here is if you are expecting to have a little boy here in the near future, sign him up. Quarterback training, day one, 3-step drop. We're going through like everything you need to get dialed in and have a quarterback play at the college level and get yourself some good chunk of change, some generational money. Go ahead and get that done. Pete Nakos, best in the business, man. Appreciate you making time.
Appreciate it.